Hello and welcome back to the Karma Stories podcast. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today I have 6 stories for you from the Tales from Tech Support subreddit. The Karma Stories podcast is published to all major podcasting platforms, and you can also read along on YouTube under our @Karma Stories podcast handle. If you have a story you'd like to submit to the podcast, you can do so by email at karmastoriespod@gmail.com. If you enjoy true crime stories, make sure to check out our podcast Karma Crime, also available on all major podcasting platforms. Alright, on to today's stories. Let's get our nerd on. This story comes to us from Death Star Help Desk. MFA would have prevented major fraud, but not before the CFO learned the hard way. Before COVID, I worked for a small business that had been around longer than the internet. The company's IT setup was, to put it mildly, a mess. Some departments were hanging on to decade-old computers and printers, while others were upgrading to new tech every year. No real rhyme or reason. When I started, I began suggesting ways to reduce costs and increase efficiency, mostly by replacing those 10-plus-year-old machines. But my real battle came when I tried to roll out MFA. At the time, we didn't have a password policy in place. Some employees were using the same password for their personal accounts, email, banks, social media, and work accounts, and never changed it, or even changed it slightly. I made the case for MFA, explaining how it could prevent breaches, especially with the loose password practices. But of course, I was shut down across the board. "It's too expensive," said the CFO. "It's too inconvenient," said the director of another department. "We've been fine without it this long," said the CEO. Fast forward to the COVID era, one of our business managers reported she wasn't receiving emails from her director. At first, we thought it was just a typical user mistake, maybe an email rule gone wrong, something that happens often with users who love organizing their inboxes with lots of subfolders. After digging deeper, we found the root cause, a rule that moved all emails from her director directly to a folder in trash. And then we discovered something worse. In her sent folder, there were several emails to accounts payable. These emails had been doctored to look like legitimate approvals from the director, approvals for invoices that had never actually been given. During COVID, most of our business and finance teams started working from home. Instead of invoices being sent via interoffice mail, they were now being emailed, and this allowed the fraud to take place. It turned out the bad actor had access to this employee's account for over a year before this all blew up. Once the change to email-based invoicing was made, they used the director's signature from real invoices and copied it onto fraudulent ones, resulting in tens of thousands of dollars in fake payments. The business manager hadn't noticed the missing emails until her director asked about an urgent, time-sensitive matter she hadn't responded to, because the emails had been sitting in trash for months. After the fraud was uncovered, the CFO finally came around. It only took a massive loss to make MFA seem like a really good idea. Now, they're suddenly all about security, but honestly, it felt a little too late. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Monia. It says, "Man, I hate this kind of imbecilic short-sightedness, and have made a similar point on another subreddit recently. Risk management should be proactive. If you're only reacting, then you're leaving yourself wide open to threats. In simpler language, just because you've never had an auto accident, it doesn't mean you never will, nor does it mean that you don't need insurance." Another commenter down below called The Knight said, "You can only tell a child so many times not to touch a hot stove, but sometimes they actually have to touch it to find out why you don't want them to in the first place. Executives are exactly like this." Unfortunately, most people in higher up positions in companies look at IT like they're just an unjustifiable expense because they sit around and don't do a whole lot most of the time. But when you really need them, they're the people who know what to do. In fact, I would say the IT department is the backbone of every major company. This story comes to us from NoWildStuff192. Worst user you could imagine threatens a raccoon with roadkill and follows through. One-man IT show for medium-sized business here computer repairs, networking, help desk, sysadmin, developer cert for ERP software, I do it all well enough. Seeing as this is a privately owned, medium-sized business, there really isn't any bureaucracy I can hide behind. So the classic IT, no ticky, no washi, is a constant battle. I track my own tasks using Monday.com and make sure I have written communication when it comes to requests for changes to the system. But a certain user with a lot of power in the organization insisted on calling. Always. I'll save a wall of exposition text by saying this person is difficult to get along with. You'll have to take my word for it, but I can get along with darn near anybody. And after working with this person for a few years, I really wish they'd just go away. A couple weeks ago, she calls me up and immediately starts screaming at me over some issue she claimed I should have dealt with months ago. I did, but she's not tech savvy enough to know the difference between the cloud being down and the power being out. And she's keen on making this somebody else's problem. This is not the first, second, or 12th time she's lost her crap over nonsense. And I am not a tech support punching bag. I hung up on her mid-rant. And then I screened her when she tried to call back. F her influence. Let her try to sick management on me. They know she's a psycho. Her response to this was to text me that I am not to contact her again about anything ever. What followed was the chillest week I'd had in months. Then the communication started up again because she runs the purchasing department and can't do crap without me. Texts and emails only. Our initial exchange was a little spicy, but after that, I thought, F it, this is what I wanted in the first place, let's encourage this. So now, I'm getting much more done because I'm not constantly getting interrupted with phone calls that demand my immediate attention. OP added an edit down at the bottom. It says, okay, just for anyone who came here because they're wondering what the heck the raccoon thing is about, the idea is that this lady punished me with exactly what I wanted in the first place, like threatening a raccoon with food. The reason you never heard of this idiom is because I made it up. Actually, it exists in other languages, just not in English. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Chedstrom. It says, classic failure of management. They allow her to perpetuate a culture of hostility and toxicity. Like others have said, document everything and cover yourself. OP responded and said, agreed, I could fill this sub with stories from the clown show that is my place of work. This one did pretty well. Maybe I'll post another. I love stories like this from absolutely any subreddit because it's a case of, hey, I'm never shopping here again, and the person looks them in the eyes and goes, oh, you promise? Because I'm sure if OP actually never did hear from that person again and was never able to contact them again, they would lead a much more stress-free life. So OP, if it ever gets to that level again where they say to never contact me by email or phone ever again, well, get that in writing from them, and then block them on everything. And then you can show the higher-ups that she said not to contact her at all, ever. This story comes to us from BuffBud96. Spider-Man operating system saves computer. I work in a tech repair store, and we've been dealing with a customer who's had his computer in our store for around a month now. So many things have gone wrong with this customer's PC that I can't even list them all. But basically, we fix one thing and another problem pops up. Every time a new problem popped up, we'd call the customer, tell him what's wrong, and give him repair options. Every time now, he's opted to just order a new part himself, bring it in, and have us replace it. We've replaced the GPU, the RAM, the motherboard, the SSD, the power supply, and practically everything at this point. We've basically built this guy a brand new computer. It still wouldn't run. Would turn on, but no display. The motherboard didn't have an onboard speaker for any kind of beep codes, no onboard LEDs for troubleshooting, nothing. So we were just throwing whatever at the wall to see what would stick. My coworker decided to try his own GPU just to test, nothing. He then tests his own singular RAM stick, and huzzah, some kind of life. He diagnoses it a bit further, and it's still not working correctly, but it's turning on. He decided to try to test the device. He'd load some random copy of Spider-Man onto the customer's PC just to see how it would run. The PC was somewhat slow and framey, but it was now working after hard installing Spider-Man onto it. He then attempts to swap the GPU back out to the customer's GPU, still works. He then takes his RAM stick out, still works. Finally, he slowly adds each stick of RAM back into the PC and tests it after each one. It still works. Finally, after all that headache, we have this guy's PC working again, and all it took was for my coworker to install Spider-Man. Now to test the unthinkable, uninstalling it. He uninstalls it as to not take up 400 gigabytes on his new SSD, and due to piracy reasons, obviously, and it still works. My coworker basically installed Spider-Man as this man's OS, and it fixed the guy's computer finally. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Sporkaholic. It says, I'm really curious why you didn't just try booting from Ubuntu on a thumb drive or something, rather than a video game. There's also boot discs like Hirem's Boot CD, even though you don't need a CD anymore, that has a lot of built-in hardware diagnostics and data recovery tools. Just seems like a weird move. Yeah, I don't know about you all on this one, but I feel like OP's coworker isn't telling them the whole story and that they did something else there to get this computer up and running. But can we take a look at something really quickly here? Why the heck are they installing a game on a customer's hard drive for any reason at all? Because there's no way in heck that that would help the situation. This whole story got me wondering just how long these people have been in the repair business for, because there's a bunch of other things they could have done beforehand, like maybe, I don't know, reseating the customer's RAM, which actually seemed to work in this case, besides all the other stuff in this story. This story comes to us from Otaku X Gamer 94. It is not our scope. This story happened about a year ago. I work at a large BPO IT service desk company, and I handle a voice account. For this account, we provide support for most of the apps and tools the users utilize. One day, a user called in because he was having an issue logging into an app within Citrix. I thought, no problem, I can help. After I remotely accessed his laptop, I noticed that the Citrix he was logged into wasn't our Citrix environment. Since it wasn't ours, the only support we could provide would be for issues like the app not opening or launching. Anything beyond that was out of our scope. I explained this to the user and advised him to contact the help desk of the company that owned the Citrix environment he was using. He told me he had already reached out to them, but they were unable to assist because they aren't allowed to touch non-company laptops, a rule we also follow. Curious, I asked what he told them when he reached out. He said he told them he was unable to open the app. However, when he contacted us, he said he was unable to log in. These are two completely different issues, but to him, they were the same. I repeatedly explained that he needed to report the issue as unable to log in to their support team because we don't handle third-party accounts. Still, he kept insisting that we resolve it on our end. I even gave him the direct email support address for the third-party help desk, but he refused to allow us to close the ticket. He claimed the issue wasn't resolved and insisted that nothing had been done on our end. The ticket remained open for weeks because he refused to follow up with the support email, saying, I don't know what to say. Eventually, my lead got fed up and told me to send an email to the third-party support team myself. I also reached out via Teams to whoever was available on their end. After almost 3 weeks, the issue was finally resolved by the third-party support team. Despite this, the user still believed that we had fixed the issue because we were the ones who took action. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Alf666. It says, you should have CC'd his manager and the manager's manager and told them what you told him and let them sort the user out. But nope, you let your desire to help and solve problems get the better of you. So now, you have taught the user that he can get you to help him with everything instead of going through the proper channels. Good luck, you're going to need it. Yeah, unfortunately going outside of your scope really does set a precedent with that customer, and they might tell other people, and then you're getting calls for things that are outside of your scope all of the time. That just leads to bad handle times, satisfaction ratings going down, and there's a reason why the company says we don't handle things that we didn't create. This story comes to us from Muspel. Nobody had any problems with the printer. So at my work, there was a recent project to replace our aging fleet of printers across the organization. This was a pretty big undertaking, but we had a good team working on it. After planning out all of the things that would need to happen for the swaps to happen seamlessly, it was decided that we would start by replacing the printer in the IT department. That way, it won't upset anyone else if something goes wrong. It's close by, and everyone in IT knows about the project, so they'll report any issues instead of ignoring them. The new IT printer is set up, and after about a week, there's been no issues. Great. We move forward and replace the next printer. Suddenly, we're getting a bunch of reports of problems. Nothing about this printer should be any different. So there's a frantic hour or two before someone on the systems team thinks to check the IT printer. Turns out, it has the same problems. It's just that nobody in IT ever has any reason to print anything, so it didn't actually get used at all during that week-long testing period. Luckily, the problems were minor and quickly fixed, and the rest of the rollout went fine. But it was an important lesson on the difference between asking, "Does the printer work?" and "Did anyone have any problems with the printer?" Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Skillafriend. It says, "Without doing a test print the moment it's installed from 2 different computers, the people who installed the printers should be demoted to coffee makers for a week." OP responded to this one and said, "Oh, it worked as a printer. I wasn't closely involved with the project, so I don't know the details, but the issues were with more niche stuff." Another commenter down below called Dustquake said, "This is why I take the 'how can I break this' approach. I'm surprised y'all didn't run your printer through the gauntlet in that week, just to get used to the thing. Hands-on is invaluable when you start dealing with the users inadvertently causing issues." Yeah, I kind of agree with this one. If they put that printer in the IT department and that was the only one that they installed, then they should have been keeping an eye on what that printer was doing, taking logs from that printer, seeing what was working and what wasn't, sending all kind of tests through it, and running it through the gauntlet of tests, just like the commenter said. I think we need to put the fault on the IT people in this case. This story comes to us from Goldney3, The Joys of Cable Pulls. In my current job, I'm a one-man IT band at a small blue-collar manufacturing plant. It's good work, gives me plenty of freedom, and I can work on projects how I see fit. My current project is redoing the CCTV cameras in the plant, because the company that installed the system is no longer in business, and only half the cameras work. Can't call for tech support, gotta do the support myself. So I've been spending the last few weeks working on running cables around the plant and setting up cameras. Today, however, took the cake. I had to run a bunch of cables into an off-the-floor office. Fortunately, said office had some tubing that goes into the ceiling, so I can pull cables through it. Bad news, that's a 2+ person job, and as noted, I'm a one-man IT band. Good news, some cool people volunteered to help me. Let's call them Jake and Patty. I work with Patty to prep the cables for the pull, then pull apart the drop ceiling so I can run the fishing tape up through the tubing. I get the cables taped to the fishing line and get Jake set up to put the cables through the pipe so I can pull it through. Everything goes well until it doesn't. See, the tubing has a curve at the top, and that's where the cables are getting caught. Jake says, "OP, it's caught, it's not making it past the bend. Do we have to send the cables down one by one?" I said, "Hold on, let me get something." As part of my prep work, I made sure to get things I knew I'd need. And with cable running and pulling, I knew I might need some cable pull lubricant. So I ran to my office, grab a bottle, and come back. "Okay, I'll push the cables back, hit it with this, and then we'll pull it through." Jake, looking at the bottle I'm handing him, I said, "It's okay, no diddy." Well, wouldn't you know it, but the cable pull lubricant does exactly what it says on the tin. It lubricates the cable pull, and suddenly, bam! The cables are through the bend, into the drop ceiling, and everything is good. But that didn't mean we couldn't get a good laugh out of it. Jake says, "Man, OP, the fact that you ran off to grab a quart-sized bottle of lube." I said no diddy. "And told me to squirt it on your cables." I said no diddy. "Got me thinking something went wrong." I said no diddy. Patty is off in the corner, doing her best not to laugh. IT, man, we get no respect. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Throwaway Old Guy. It says, "That moment will live for a very long time. Maybe put a small note that says, 'No Diddy,' where those cables exited, so the next person to ever see them wonders what it's all about." You know, I really enjoyed this story. It kind of sounded like OP was on a slippery slope, but they greased the wheels of progress and got things moving. Honestly, I'd say they handled the situation like a well-oiled machine. It's not every day you squirt your way out of a jam and pull off such a slippery save. Okay, I can hear you groaning from here, so we'll stop those now. If you enjoy daily Reddit stories, I encourage you to follow and give us a 5-star rating on whichever podcasting platform you enjoy the most. And if you're watching and listening on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button and drop a like on the video. It really helps us out. I thank you for watching and listening. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.